everyone, and welcome to AfriGO Live Conversations. If it's the third Friday of the month, then you know it's a day to have a chat on AfriGO. Today we have an amazing conversation, and it's being led by a very good friend of AfriGO and also a personal friend to me. Our guest today is called Sam Ngugi. Sam is the founder and the director of Missions Campaign Network. He may clarify those titles. Um, Missions Campaign Network, which is a missions mobilizations organization and a sending organization, I hope. But Sam is going to tell us more about MCN and a lot more about what we are talking about today. Sam, please introduce yourself. What's the name of your organization and what do you do?
Well, thank you, Mercy. I'm very glad to be with you and to have this conversation, especially regarding mobilization. And yeah, thank you for all that you're doing through AfriGO, the people you're reaching, the stories you're writing. I think it just continues to strengthen the reality of Africa really emerging to be a voice of mission globally. So thank you for your sacrifice and creativity and all that. So my name is Sam Ngugi. I, I am a mobilizer. Together with my wife, we have been mobilizing for the last 10 years or so. And we work with Mission Campaign Network, which is a mission organization based in Kenya. And we basically go out to envision God's people, educate God's people, challenge God's people, and journey with them through the process so that we engage the nations with the gospel. And we also seek to send through Gen 12, which is the sending arm of Mission Campaign Network. So, yeah, I think in brief, that's MCN and Gen 12.
Uh, Thank you, Sam. Why did you start MCN? What's the vision behind MCN?
I think the vision behind MCN and Gen 12 is maybe what I would call an encounter with the reality of God's mission. I usually say that my first conversion was from being a sinner to a follower and disciple of Jesus. I think my second conversion was really understanding the mission of God and His redemptive purpose for all nations, not just myself, my family, and my neighbors. And so, yeah, about how many years now? 15 years ago is when Harriet and I were introduced to the Kairos course. We did the Kairos course, and it just turned our lives upside down because, the major paradigm shift of discovering that mission is not just a few texts in the Bible. Is from Genesis to Revelation is a key theme, key purpose. It's what God is doing, among the nations, and seeing history and just understanding how mission, how the gospel came to us. You're familiar with our education system that would tell us some of the missionaries that brought the gospel, they are known as explorers. And then you're introduced to this whole world where you really discover how God used all these ordinary people to bring the gospel to us. But of course, again, really being introduced to the remaining task of world evangelization and all these unreached people groups around the world. So all that information at a very critical time when we were really seeking to know how to serve God and to live a life that really matters, not just in this world, but in the life to come. That's how God really, He used that occasion, 2006, to awaken us to that reality. So Mission Campaign Network then became the next step where God, He just helped us to see how the Church of Africa has great potential to participate in God's mission, but there is very little knowledge, understanding, awareness. And that's how Mission Campaign Network was formed, to just go out there and campaign for God's mission, call God's people to participate in God's mission. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Sam. That's a good vision. Um, One of the first videos that we did, someone raised a question and said, there's a lot happening with mobilization and mobilization days and mobilization. People just need to wake up and go. It has been said in the Bible, like, I have sent you, go. Why do we need mission mobilization or mission mobilizers? What's the essence of mobilization? Why do we need to mobilize? Do we need to mobilize?
Yeah, good question. Thank you so much. Mission mobilization or the ministry of mobilization really exists on the basis of the vision of God. That there is a mission that God has entrusted us with, that God has invited us into. But the general tendency for the church is, just like the Israelites, to either lose the vision and therefore needing reawakening, to be reminded, for those that are not aware to be made aware. And so mission mobilization, especially in this particular time, for us in Africa is so critical because we have, in the last 2 years or so, become the most Christian continent in the world. There are more Christians in Africa than anywhere else in the world. And that is remarkable. That's a miracle that has not happened before in the last 1700 years. So we have the mandate and this is our moment really to be a blessing to the nations. So mission mobilization then is sort of, it's in the gap. It's about God's people, creating awareness, envisioning, empowering, encouraging, and, equipping, but then providing the processes through which people can engage the nations fruitfully, strategically, and intentionally. So that is really the essence. It's the mission of God. At such a time as this, we ought to be involved in blessing the nations with the gospel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam, for that answer and that explanation. That opens our eyes a lot to the reality of mobilization and why we need people mobilized to go and to do everything that we need to do for missions. I recently listened to a talk that you had given called Total Mobilization, and it was very interesting, and it's something I would want to speak to us about today. What is total mobilization? What's that concept of total mobilization?
Well, yeah, and I think before I say anything about total mobilization, let me just add some few thoughts to what I
Yes.
said about really the essence of mobilization. I think one of the critical issues in mobilization is that you have, at this point, maybe the largest church, not just in Africa, but globally in terms of numbers. Maybe over 800 million followers of Jesus, according to research, maybe more. But the challenge is that you have just a very small percentage of God's people engaging in the Great Commission in a very fruitful and meaningful way. A lot of the majority are just, either speculating on the side, watching others in action, or really not aware. So mobilization is really about getting all God's people, all engaged in God's mission to the nations. And when we say all, we're talking about beginning with Sunday school all the way, children, young people, leaders, families, business people, career people, full-time Christian workers, everybody getting on board to engage in God's mission to the nations. And we have such an opportunity to actually fulfill, so to speak, the Great Commission in our lifetimes, because there's just so much going for us. We have the numbers, there are resources, we are well networked, the church is so resourced. So mobilization really helps the church to maximize her potential in the mission of God. Now,
Wonderful.
coming to total mobilization, this concept of total mobilization is particularly, we are thinking about it in the context of Africa. Of course, at this point, within the world of mobilization, we know that there are, three levels of mobilization. You have level one, where you help people to discover God's mission, have their worldview changed, so that they see mission not as a program or activity of the church or a calling for the few, or mission just being about sending people across the nations, across countries, but that everybody needs to realize God is on mission. God is on mission, and all God's people are invited. We are all called. It's not for the few. We are all called to participate according to the various graces that God has given us. Whether you are a career person, whatever gifts, talents, graces that God has given us, we all need to channel that in God's mission to the nations. Now, so that's level one. But level two is where you actually equip people, translating all these gifts, all these graces and talents, and equipping and sharpening and empowering that for fruitful engagement. So people need to be equipped. It's not enough to have passion to be a doctor. You need to go to a medical school to be trained to be a doctor. So we need God's people really trained and equipped. But that's not all. We need structures to be able to send people at level three, where people are fruitfully deployed and positioned and placed in the field where they can be fruitful. If you are a teacher, you're placed where you're strategically engaging God's mission. I think there are too many teachers or all these professionals right in the mission field, but they are not aware. They are not aware they're in the field. So they need level one. Maybe they need level two, because they're already deployed by their workstations or their employers. So we need all that happening. But within Africa, and this is where total mobilization comes in, we are saying it's much more than placing, empowering people, envisioning people, and placing them where they are meant to be engaged. It's about the entire infrastructure of mission. Okay, the Western mission has had almost 300 years of being in the business of mission, and they have developed a very solid infrastructure for mission. Whether it is local churches engaging in the West, whether it is sending, supporting, caring, and all these other aspects of engaging in God's mission. Not just the hardware, so to speak, but also the software. They have developed through reflection and practice a mission theology, a missiology that enables them to engage fruitfully in God's mission. No wonder then they were able to send all these missionaries around the world. But for us in Africa, we are sort of starting. No, we have been there, we are engaging, but a lot of our mission mobilization is about getting people from this point, making sure they have finances to be in this other point, and engage in mission, do church planting, write reports home. But mission is bigger than that. For us to have really fruitful, healthy engagement in God's mission, we need to think about the entire infrastructure of mission. We need, for example, to identify the gaps that are there. I mean, when you went for short term yourself, you remember those days. A lot of our missionaries, they have very minimal, if any, member care. Okay, if you just to think about what kind of member care ought to be given or to be developed for our missionaries, so they don't go out there and then burn out within a few years, or leave just hustling and frustrated because we don't have the infrastructure or even the theology or missiology to help us, care for our missionaries properly. Think about many churches that have mission statements, but they are not missional. They want to reach nations, they are international, have a global vision, but they don't even have a statement, that tells them what does this mean. What does this mean to the Sunday school and to the youth, to the families, and so on? So, total mobilization is excitement beyond numbers. That this is Africa's time.
Yeah.
It's developing our foundations. It's developing our infrastructure. It is part of what you're doing, through AfriGO, writing these stories, documenting these stories. It's about having missional reflections coming from the field. Our mission, we send missionaries. I don't know the last time you read an article, something from from our missionaries, to the church, saying, when I went out there to do language learning, this is how I was trained. These are the challenges I faced. These are the reflections that come out. Oh, you guys who develop tools and programs, you need to think about ABCD. So, and all those things. It's about mission research. If you right now you ask the church in Kenya, how many missionaries have you sent in the last 10 years? Not just in the northeastern part of Kenya, but the rest of Africa or the rest of the world. You don't get those statistics. There are all these new things coming up. We have all these nationalities coming to Kenya. So mission is not just sending people to, North Africa, Horn of Africa. Some of them have come to our own country. What are we thinking about those things? So total mobilization is looking at the entire infrastructure of mission within African context, identifying the gaps, the opportunities, and areas that we need to develop, to reflect, to write about, to consult about, and to grow in, so that we are fruitful and maximize our potential in God's mission. That's how I would explain it with those many words.
Yes. It's very interesting that you should mention the stories of the people who are in the mission field, because that is actually something that as AfriGO we are really striving to tell. We don't know why people we are not getting as many as we would love to. So for you who is listening to us and you are a missionary in the field somewhere, or you know your church has sent people, we are looking for for such stories that we can write about and show the church this is what is happening in this and this place. So to our listeners and the people who are watching today and following this conversation, are you a missionary in a field and you have a story to tell? You can write to me, you can write on the comment, you can send a DM, I will put um, our email there. You can send your email, because these stories that are happening where you are stories that the church needs to hear. And you need to know what need is there for where you're working. How can we pray with you? What's happening there? What do you need? We would love to hear such stories. Thank you, Sam, for that explanation of total mobilization. As you have said in many words, but there are many good words. I think now it's clear that it's not just one-sided thing of let's all go. There's the structures and everything that you have mentioned. And thank
Yeah.
you for that. Now, I know you're currently uh, you and someone else, as I am private, you have started an organization called the Send Africa Network. What um, what motivated you to start Send Africa Network?
So yeah, Send Africa Network is a network,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily an organization, so to speak. And it is the idea of coming up with a network that would bring together Africans in the diaspora and the church and the mission movement back in Africa came about through myself and other friends that we have been journeying together. People like Ebenezer from the UK, Daniel from Ghana, and we have been talking, Alan from South Africa, just engaging about mobilizing Africa. How would this look like? So the concepts of total mobilization comes in, and of course, as we share life and as we share vision and passion for mobilization, we realized that there is really need to maximize our potential through collaboration between the Africans in the diaspora and what is happening in Africa on the continent. So that's how Send Africa Network came about. It's to link the two. Now, the diaspora, African diaspora Christian movement in the West is huge. And I mean, just here in the UK, if not just, let's talk about Europe. If you consider the numbers of Christians in Europe, if only we were thinking, if you have about, say, 15 million Africa or Afro diaspora Christians, maybe in about 7 to 10 countries in Europe, this is their home now. They're raising families here. They're working here. Okay. Now, chances are that about 50% of them would be Christians. Okay. Given the statistics back home, you would have maybe over 7 million Afro diaspora Christians in Europe. Okay. If you mobilized 10% of that effectively, okay, you would raise a mission force of almost 1 million laborers. So the whole question of re-evangelization of Europe, okay, begins to make sense, not just in terms of sending missionaries from Africa to Europe, but mobilizing, equipping, empowering the ones that are here. But that's one side of the story. Think about the amount of money that Africans in the diaspora are remitting back in the continent. I think in 2018, the amount of money that the diaspora sent to Africa was more than the foreign direct investment. It was a huge amount. Now, we suppose that a significant number of the people that are sending money back to Africa are actually Christians. Okay, if that resource base is tapped, and you just think about 10% of it going to the mission of God in terms of all that we are talking about, level 1, level 2, level 3, mission research, developing all this infrastructure, that would be amazing collaboration. And we need this kind of collaboration. And so Send Africa Network is about that kind of partnership where the diaspora Christians work with the church on the continent, to send Africa to the nations, to send Africa to be a blessing to the nations, particularly the least reached people groups of the world.
Wow. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that. So who is involved in Send Africa Network? Who are the members of Send Africa Network?
So Send Africa Network is open to all God's people of African descent. That is, of course, the continent. That's home base. We're talking about Christians of African descent, both in Europe, African Americans, Caribbeans, wherever Africans are, God's people. We want to begin networking and collaborating and journeying together to engage in God's mission. So that's the scope of those that are involved in Send African Network.
Okay, thank you for that. If you're joining us, we are talking to Sam Ngugi, who is talking to us from the UK. He's the founder and the director of Missions Campaign Network, and he has spoken to us just now about another network that he and some of his friends have started called the Send Africa Network, that is seeking to have a collaboration between the church in Africa and the Africans in the diaspora. So if you're listening to me and you're either in any of those categories, that's you. That's you. And that's the kind of person that Sam is looking for. So how can the church get involved in Send Africa Network, Sam?
So, because of the nature of our mobilization in terms of total mobilization, then the opportunities are many. If there are churches out there that are wondering how do we equip our churches or help our churches to grow to become missional churches, so that we can engage in God's mission someplace in the world or in their own context, then Send Africa Network is a place to be, because then you have all these churches, organizations, institutions that are part of the Send Africa Network, and we are there to build relationships. We are, by the grace of God, the Ubuntu people. We are communal, we are relational. So Send Africa Network then draws all these people together, where we can compare notes and get to know who is where and what do they need and how can we work together. Are you needing, help, empowerment, collaboration in level 1? Then there are tools and programs and resources for that. Are you engaged in level 2 and you need partnership, collaboration, engagement in level 2? Then that would be the case. Are you a church that is just wondering, where do I even start? A conversation would be helpful in that sense, and then a whole new world opens up, whether it is in terms of training and equipping, sending and supporting, and all that is involved. So we want to be able to partner and collaborate with all expressions of the body of Christ, all God's people. Wherever you are, then there is room for us to work together to engage in God's mission.
Oh, that's wonderful. So if someone is listening and they're thinking, yeah, that's what I've been looking for, I need something like that, how do they get to you? How do they connect with you? Do you have a website? Do you have an email? Do you have a place they can go and find you?
Yeah, I mean, we have our website. We launched Send Africa Network in February this year, after many meetings of consultations and thinking through and developing the charter and so on. So we launched in February. Now we are in the process of developing the website. So if people have a Send Africa Network somewhere on their note, they can be watching out for the launch of the network. But meanwhile, I think I'll be able to send you the email address for any inquiries, and then you can post it for people to get in touch.
All right. So you have had some. If you have listened to this conversation and you're thinking that the Send Africa Network is something that is very interesting and you'd want to get involved in, look out for the launch. It's coming soon. As I say, watch this space.
Yeah.
They'll be launching the Send Africa Network very soon. Sam, thank you so much for the conversation about mobilization and total mobilization. Is there something that you had thought about and you had said, when I talk with Mercy tomorrow, I'll have to mention this, and Mercy didn't ask? Is there something you'd like to say that I probably didn't ask and would have loved to say?
Wow, I suppose it's just the thinking that this is our Kairos moment as the African church. We must seize it. We must seize it for the glory of God. I think we have work to do. As we think about mobilizing God's people, sending missionaries to the nations and so on, we have work to do. And the mission of God calls us to step up, really, to mature and grow. Um, we need to see a movement out of Africa to the unreached people groups in our continent. I think the notion that even up to now we are expecting the Western Church to send missionaries to some of our communities is, we have a responsibility. And so I think what I can say is that, yeah, it's just not right. It's not fair that we have unreached people groups in Africa. Some of their situations are just so desperate, and these are our people. We need to do something. Our Christianity must surely translate to being a blessing to the nations, beginning with the unreached people groups in Kenya. It's just not right that 2,000 years later, we have communities that are yet to hear the gospel in a manner they can clearly understand and make an informed choice as to whether to follow Jesus or not. It's just not right. And I think we have work to do. So, for all young people out there who are wondering how to live their lives for the glory of God, and they mean business, you know, sometimes young people say they want to turn the world upside down for Jesus, and then the reality hits. The reality is, we can't actually touch the world for Jesus. But if you're out there and you're wondering, what is this? Hey, there are people who have not heard the gospel in our own continent, over 1,000 unreached people groups. There's no way we are going to have to wait for Western missionaries to come. We have to do something, and we need to do it now. And by God's grace, I think we have what it takes to do it.
Thank you, Sam. I think what I've heard from that is it is not right, it is not fair that there are people in our backgrounds, in our backyard, who have not heard the gospel, and we are just sitting pretty, waiting to turn the world upside down. And sometimes we don't know how do we do that. Preach to that person, move to that community that you know, in your country that you know, those people, they do not have the gospel, they do not have a church in their community, they do not have the Bible in a language they understand, they do not probably know a Christian within their community. That's where to go, if I had some right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sam, for this conversation today. Would you like to post maybe the MCN website or contacts? If anybody wants to join them, how can they contact you?
So for those that would like to, maybe attend a mission course, find out how to engage in God's mission, please, visit Mission Campaign Network website. You will see many programs there. If you're interested in, a course, or you're interested in being prepared to be a missionary, you will find pathways there that you can follow to be engaged and to be empowered to engage.
Thank you, Sam. It was lovely to have this conversation with you. We appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, and we will continue talking. And thank you for being a friend of AfriGO.
Thank you very much. I appreciate, and
Thank you.
for all that you are doing. God bless you.
Thank you, Sam.